and welcome to Dregs of Wisdom with Andrew Tanner.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Andrew Tanner. Welcome to Dregs of Wisdom, episode 1. And so you might be asking yourself, what is Dregs of Wisdom all about? I'm going to tell you that today, but before I do, it's important to just acknowledge, why are we here? Why is this podcast? Why are we doing this? And if you're not like a family member of mine, then most likely you're here because, like me, you have been afflicted with the disease of seeking. If you don't know what I mean by that, ask yourself how many self-help podcasts, self-help books, and kind of self-help people and ideas you follow in your life. If you're constantly seeking to improve your life, to better your life in one way or another, then you, my friend, have been afflicted with the disease of seekership. Now, I too have said disease. In fact, I feel like my whole life I've reveled in the idea that I was a seeker. Paradoxically, I found through 40 years of living and 20 plus years of studying kind of spirituality that the essence of enlightenment, or however you want to think of it, is literally the opposite of seeking. Let that sink in. So it's like letting go, right? We've all heard that term. But really the essence of thinking that where you are right now is not where you want to be. You want to be some improved version of yourself. That is, in essence, the opposite of kind of an enlightened way of being. It's the opposite of inner peace. It is antithetical to inner peace. And so, given that, let's say I've come to that realization, and maybe many of you have as well, why then would we do this podcast? Why would we talk about spirituality and yoga and health and wellness and how to live a good life and all that stuff? And frankly, every spiritual teacher will say the same thing, like you shouldn't talk about it. For example, Lao Tzu, he's famous, kind of the founder of Tao, modern philosophical Taoism. He's famous for saying the Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. So this idea that whatever you would say would inherently kind of be separated from the truth, this idea has been repeated over and over again. So why should we say anything at all? Why should we have this little podcast here? And why should we call it Dregs of Wisdom? We'll get to that at the end. Well, the reason why is pretty simple. Because it's what I like to do. And when you don't have to do anything, right? When you're not doing something to achieve, when you're not doing something to get better, when you're not doing something because you have to, you do things because you like to do them. You do things because it's what gives you a sense of meaning and flow. And for me, I've just always been compelled to study and talk about these kind of ideas and share these kind of ideas. And so that's why I'm here. Now, why you're here, that's another story. I'm not sure. You could be my mother for all I know. She may be the only person that ever watches this. Who knows? But hopefully there's more than just my mother out there watching my videos in the YouTube land. And I want to share with you now this other idea about the term dregs of wisdom, where it came from, and why I think it illustrates an important lesson that we need to take when we think about improving ourselves. Because in all these kind of wellness podcasts, I'll in the future be interviewing. I've got some great people lined up for interviews who are, recognized wellness experts. And when we listen to experts, right, we tend to take their word as a kind of gospel, or often, whether it's, science or religion or whatever you believe in, people tend to have others that they follow and believe and whose words have very important standing in their consciousness. And the thing that I always want to emphasize on this show is that every piece of knowledge, every piece of information, everything that's discussed, every experience that's shared is really and truly just the dregs that are being left behind. This is a story that was originally written by Chuang Tzu, another of the philosophical Taoists, And I want to share this story with you. I am going to read it. It's brief, and it's about this old man who is a wheel maker named Old Payan. And the story goes that he was this wheel maker. Back then they had these stone wheels they made, and they had to be carved and chiseled into these perfect round wheels. And they had to be made very, very strongly so that there wouldn't be cracks in them. They had to be cut just so. And he had been doing this, he was probably around the age of 70. So he had been making wheels for over 50 years. And he was kind of known as being this kind of free man, so to speak. He walked around the yard, and imagine in China there would be this area where all the artisans were. So all the people handling the horses, and other people making carpentry, and other people making wheels and wagons and things. There'd be this big yard where the artisans were, like a courtyard. At the top of the courtyard there would be a duke. The duke would be up sitting in his chair, and up kind of raised above everyone so he could look down at everyone. And so the duke of this area, Duke Huan, he was kind of known for being a vicious military character who would cut someone's head off like it was nothing. And this was during a time of peace. So he, decided he liked to go out and sit in the courtyard, and he would read, the Analects of Confucius. He would read the stories of the scholars, the accepted enlightened scholarship of the day. And one day, the old wheelwright Payan, he set aside his chisel and hammer, and he just walked straight up to the steps, and he approached the duke, and he said, "May I ask you, Lord, what is it that you're reading?" And, the duke was kind of surprised, taken aback that this, guy who was at a lower level than him socially would just casually ask him, what he was reading, as if that old man even knew how to read. And the duke kind of responded in a haughty way, and he said, "I'm reading the words of the great sages," as if kind of to say, like, why would an old man, like an uneducated bumpkin like you, even care what I'm reading about? And Old Payan kind of looked at him with a thoughtful look in his eye, and he asked, "Are those sages alive?" And the duke spat. "Master Confucius is long dead, of course." This would have been a couple hundred years after Confucius was alive. And so Old Payan responded, "Well, what you're reading is just the dregs they've left behind." Now, the duke, kind of his anger finally erupted, because first of all, he didn't like that this person who was lower than him in standing was talking to him like an equal. And then second of all, he was basically insulting the stuff that the duke thought was, this very important spiritual text. And so he pulls his sword out, and he's like, "Explain yourself or I'll chop off your head." And just without any fear or anything, the old Payan just says, "Well, here's how I see it. When I chisel a wheel, right, if I hammer it too softly, the chisel will slide and it won't grip. If I hammer it too hard, it'll get stuck, and I'll make cracks in the wood and cracks in the stone. When the wheel moves smoothly and my strikes are neither too soft nor too hard, then I know in my hands and I respond to it from my heart. There are no words to properly describe this perfect place of balance. No one taught it to me, and I cannot teach it to my son. I am 70 years old and have been striking the wheels for most of my life, and I will never be able to pass on my teaching to my son or anyone with mere words. And so I believe that those great sages of old died and took their insights into the Tao with them. That's why I said what you're reading is just the dregs that they left behind." And so the story actually ends there. Chuangzi doesn't tell us whether Duke Huan chops Payan's head off, or whether he bows and realizes the enlightened teaching that he just heard. But I was really struck when I heard this story, because I think so many times we want to know the truth so desperately that when we hear a good idea, we just attach to it as if it's true. We accept it for a while. We walk around kind of spouting it like it's our belief for a while. And then we end up getting in fights about who's right and who's wrong, when in the end, insight into the nature of reality is something that only you can experience for yourself. Only you can understand your own consciousness. Only you can make sense of your own life. The best psychologists in the world, the best philosophers and spiritual people in the world, they cannot experience you. And so you and I and everyone, all the information that we're taking in, we should realize that it's the dregs of other people's existence. And for me, this acknowledgement that there are billions, and really infinite number of individuals in the world, not just humans, but beings, from animals to a mitochondria to a cell. There are infinite number of ways that we can experience reality. And so I just take all the self-help wisdom with a gigantic grain of salt, maybe a spoonful of salt. And I found that my goal, at least with this podcast, is that if I'm listening to others' wisdom, I'm going to take it in and use that to walk my own path. And I hope you'll do the same. So, I'm looking forward to having lots of great people on the show. I've got some really cool podcasts lined up. I hope you'll get to listen to some of the interviews with some of the people who have been influential in my life. I'll also be sharing stories of my own journeys into yoga and fasting and health, wealth, and all that good stuff. So that's it. Remember, it's all dregs, all the dregs we left behind, and see you in the next one.